Okay, everyone, welcome to panel 3. So we're going to talk about the RDCA-DAP and its intersection with other data platforms and try to learn a little bit about some of the other groups that are already working in this space and how we can work well together. And so I want to introduce our panelists and thank them for being with us today. We have Vanessa Farley from RareX. We have Pamela Gavin from NORD's I Am Rare. We have Alex Sherman, who's the director for the Center for Innovation and Bioinformatics at the Neurologic Clinical Research Institute at Harvard Medical School. And we have Tina Irv, who is in charge of the NIH's Rare Disease Clinical Research Network. And so I'm really glad to have all of our excellent panelists with us. And the first question is basically for Vanessa, what do you see as the kinds of contributions that your platform could make to the RDCA-DAP? And so I want to ask you to start, and then we'll go to Pamela next. Go
sure.
Ahead,
can you hear me? Great. I think that a big thing that we've heard about all day long is a lot of groups that have spent years collecting data. There's so many other groups out there that haven't had that opportunity, or they don't even have an organization to do it. So I think that what RareX brings to the table is that ability to connect and help smaller groups or even smaller communities that don't quite have an organization yet together to collect better and more robust data that makes it enabled to be shared much more quickly. I think the last panel really brought it forward to say, thinking about this early and thinking about this often is really key in the space that that is going to really drive rare disease research forward. And I think that's really what RareX brings to the table when it comes to the c-path and RDCA-DAP's initiative.
Thanks. Pamela, do you want to chime in on that? Share with us a little bit about what you feel the
Sure.
I Am Rare registry is bringing.
Sure. So this is an exciting project to be a part of and to listen to all the different folks who've spoken earlier today. Some of which you may have heard from Vanessa is that early on in the process for us developing the program that we have was really to look at what opportunities could patient organizations and
Pam's feed has frozen, so I'm going to pause there. Pam, we can come back to you. And we're going to move on to Alex. Do you want to share a little bit about what your group might be able to contribute?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay, great.
Yes.
So good afternoon. Thank you for your patience to be with us today. I'm glad, and thank you, the organizers, for inviting us. So basically, we've been talking about data aggregation and data sharing and so on. But first of all, you probably need to capture that data. So what we have in terms of contributions, so we have several platforms. One of them is known as a Neurobank that allows to run natural history studies from a patient-centric view. So basically, you may allow patients to participate in multiple simultaneously running studies, and then you may share data even between those studies if PIs decide to share and collaborate. But also, that's one thing. So basically, patient-centric data capture system. Another platform that we have is for the unique patient identification. So basically, we're running a server that allows generate unique patient identifiers, not only per patient, but also per patient per study. So that will certainly minimize the concerns of privacy and security, especially for ultra-rare diseases where patients may be identified just by the fact that they were participating in several studies. And another one is we've got a platform that allows us to harmonize, map harmonize, and merge information. So we did it, or continue doing this for several diseases, merging data from clinical trials, so including one of the most interesting diseases that we have is ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease. We merged information from 23 clinical trials, almost 11,000 subjects, and this is the largest in the world reference data set for this disease. And the last thing that I would like to mention also is that sharing is certainly important, but it is even more important to understand what can you share in terms of regulatory compliance, in terms of permissions, in terms of licenses, and in terms of egos of investigators who collected that data. So I think it's an important part of any discussion around sharing and distribution of data. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. And Tina Erb, do you want to chime in next with what your group is learning about data sharing and data sharing platforms?
Absolutely, thank you. So can you hear me all right? Oh, excellent. My big worry. So I'm part of the Rare Disease Clinical Research Network, which is a consortia or a network of 20 different consortium. Each one studies 3 different rare diseases. And the RDCA has been around for 15 years, so they have a lot of history of looking at a lot of rare diseases over a long period of time. One of the big focuses in this cycle is really data standards and having data that's interoperable with other groups. And that's one of the reasons we're really happy to reach out to these groups, is that, you know, while there can't just be one set group that does everything, that would be impossible. But we have to have something that allows us all to have our data communicate, and we have to communicate and work together. And so that's a really big emphasis for us, is really the communication. The other strength of the RDCRN that we bring to the table is that our consortia consists of clinicians, data bioinformatics people, family groups working on all these different consortia along with the NIH. So there's a fair number of resources available, and that's what we're bringing to the table.
Thanks, Tina.
Sure.
And so unfortunately, I think we've lost Pamela Gavin from NORS I Am Rare, which is really unfortunate. I think she's going to try to call back in, so I apologize for her departure. And hopefully we'll welcome her back soon. But the next question I want to address is sort of, what do you see as the opportunity for collaboration between your platform and the RDCA-DAP? So what are the opportunities there, and what do you see as the challenges that would need to be overcome in order to collaborate? Vanessa, I'm going to start with you.
I think Tina brought this up too. I think the ability to collaborate is really important in the communication. Like she said, not everybody can do all of the things, and we have so many rare diseases to reach and to support that really there's working together is the biggest key. And in different areas, I think that the RDCRN is doing some amazing things in the government aspect of it, involving the clinics and the researchers that it's direct to patient and direct researchers. The same thing with ALIPS is. We're actually collecting data in the natural history way, the kind of the way that we've traditionally collected data from rare disease. Additionally, I Am Rare with more traditional registries where it's direct to patient, it's community stewarded and community created. I think the big thing that RareX brings to this table and to the ability to collaborate with c-path is that standardization piece, is that we really do want to collect more structured data where it's not, we're not asking the same question 7 different ways across the background. We're made up of a group of people who have collected data for 15 or 20 years and have made that mistake over and over and over again, and trying to make sure we're collaborating in the places that we don't, and making sure we're not overstepping anybody's toes, or making sure we're collaborating where we can, and making sure we're complementary in those spaces. I think the big thing around this is education. When it comes down to the RDCA-DAP initiative, it's new, it's very different. It's hard for organizations and hard for patients to wrap their heads around kind of this new initiative around big data, and how they can effectively do it, effectively share their data and steward it all the way through the process. And then what they can expect in the background when their data is being used, and what's coming of that. Because I think that we've done a big disservice in a lot of these spaces that we haven't let patients know when their data is being used. They haven't been able to access the the analysis tools or the analyses that are coming out of it. So I think that that's kind of the big thing that as we're moving towards this this federated data area and this big data space. I think it's a big education piece that we're going to need to overcome, and making sure that we're collaborating around. I mean, I've talked to Tina several times around the data standards thing, and I think that we're finding those areas of alignment and finding the niches that we all can survive in is great, and it really will make sure that rare disease data collection is brought into the 21st century and 22nd century really effectively.
Thank you. Alex, I would turn to you next. What do you see as sort of the opportunities for collaboration and some of the challenges? I would ask all of our panelists to mute if you're not speaking. We're hearing a little feedback on the line. So Alex, to you next. Opportunities and challenges.
Yeah. Let me start with challenges, actually. So one of the challenges, and especially it was announced at the very beginning of this workshop, that we're planning to merge data from multiple sources, or at least reference those data in a federated manner. The challenge is to understand what type of data and what quality of data are in all those sources. Because you definitely, especially if we plan, again, coming from the FDA, if we plan to use some of this data for control arms in the open label trials delivered to the FDA, so at least to some portion of this data, so the quality should be of the same as for the clinical trials data, Part 11 compliance, GCP, and so on. So having just CDISC format would not be sufficient for the FDA, I hope. So and in this case, we need to understand. So we all call natural history, but it's from mom and pop registries to some repositories to natural histories to regulated natural histories, and certainly understanding from what kind of data source the data will be coming to this resource at c-path is enormously important for the success of this effort. So another thing, as I mentioned, is again trying to figure out and develop a system of incentives for the data owners. So on one hand, we can say, sure, patients own the data, and it's certainly in patients' interest to share data, which is certainly true, but patients don't physically usually hold the data. So basically, those are institutions, organizations, foundations, and certainly investigators who do this. And some of them are quite skeptical because they do all the work, but someone else analyzes and publishes and benefits of the data they labored for years on. So, for example, as part of our effort, and we work in multiple diseases, so is to acknowledge that data contributors shall be fully blown co-authors on all papers that are developed based on the data analysis of their data sources. So that's one of the things, and certainly what we can bring to the table. We have natural histories in multiple diseases, and we have years and years of experience how to do this together and merge this together. When we're talking about data, it's not just natural histories, but it's also, as was declared by the c-path slides, so genetic information, biofluids information, omics information, images, and so on and so on and so forth. Okay.
Thanks, Jeff. We've got a caller on the line that I'm hoping is Pamela. Pamela, is that you? Do you want to chime in? We're talking about opportunities and challenges in collaborating, and so maybe you could chime in on that if you're on the line.
Hi, Katie. I apologize for my poor connection. I wish I could say that I was on some exotic island somewhere, but sadly, that's not the case. So I apologize for that, and thank you for the opportunity with the call-in number. So there's so many opportunities for collaboration. I think one of the most exciting aspects to the RDCA-DAP is to really address a theme that has been discussed in various contexts throughout the day, which is breaking down the silos and looking at opportunities to contribute data in a way that that will tell a better picture and help to share in an environment that's plausible to accelerate the understanding of how diseases progress over time, whether it's data coming from patients, from researchers, from those in industry studying the disease. And I think we really can't afford not to share that information if we really want to make on the promise of accelerating drug development for rare diseases, because there's pockets of knowledge across the various areas of the community, and the best way to rise the tide for all the boats is to share that data in this format or a format similar to this.
Thanks, Pam. And Tina, do you want to chime in and share from your point of view sort of what you see as the opportunities in collaborating with the RDCA-DAP, and what do you see as some of the challenges?
I was good and I muted when you told me to. All right. So I think this is a great opportunity that it's wonderful that we're all working together, and it's very exciting. Some of the strengths are that there are over 7,000 different rare diseases, and everyone's kind of coming at it from a different point. So some people have been studying their diseases for 15, 20 years and have a lot of data and a lot of experience, and a lot of diseases are just being identified. And part of the problem is they will start reinventing how to collect data, how to standardize data, and you don't have to do that. You can look at what other people have done before you and work together. The other thing you can do is look for commonalities, that there are a lot, at the end of the day, everyone is looking for a treatment for a rare disease. The pathway we take is the same. We have to go through all the same regulatory processes. We all have to do the same scientific discovery. It might be in a different pathway, but we still need to do it. But look for commonalities of what other groups have done and how you could maybe partner with other groups. And this provides us an opportunity to bring different disease groups together that have commonalities that they might not have thought of before. I think it's important it doesn't matter whether you're a mom in a kitchen starting your own rare disease group and you're doing it on an Excel spreadsheet. You can look to groups like this to find the data standards and how to collect the data. And from day one, you can start collecting very strong data that will be usable in the future. And then I also think that all of us working together is going to help de-risk the clinical trial process, because the data you're bringing to the FDA, the data you're bringing to investors, the data that you're bringing to industry is strong, reliable data that doesn't need to be repeated. So we're saving time, we're saving money, and we're saving a lot of effort. And every data point collected on someone with a rare disease is valuable. So.
Thank you, Tina. As usual, I agree with everything you said. We're sort of finishing up sort of our discussion, and we're going to transition to some Q&As. Jane, I'm hoping that you can come on, because I think actually most of these questions are probably best meant for you. So we've had one ask for the unlock cures slide, if we can share that. And then we also had a couple of different asks about who to contact at c-path if they want to participate. And, you know, can any patient group participate, even if they're not working with NORD-IM Rare, was one question. And the short answer to that is yes. So c-path is pretty well equipped to bring in data from multiple sources, which is one of the main reasons why we wanted to partner with them. And so absolutely. And then a similar question coming in from a drug developer about, you know, who do they contact at c-path if they want to take advantage of this resource in developing treatment. So Jane, I'm gonna go to you to address those questions and maybe let participants know where they can find that information.
Sure. So the simple answer is if you go to the c-path webpage, you can, we have an email address, RDCA-DAP@c-path.org. And if you're interested in contributing data, have questions about contributing data, have questions about the analytics platform, they can all be sent there. Also, there'll be a survey at the end of this meeting where you can leave your email address and we'll contact you. So we're always interested in talking to you. If there are too many of you all at once, it might take me a little while to get back to everyone, but absolutely. And yeah, we want to work with everyone, nor does our partner in this. Certainly the IAMRARE platform is an important foundational data contributor, but we're absolutely interested in data from all sorts of sources. And that's really part of the reason why we wanted to have this panel, was to talk to other major data collectors who are also been encountering the same questions, because we want all of these platforms to be interoperable and be able to work with all of that data together. This really is a community project. And I think the other question that was in there was about the key registry key graphic, and perhaps Pam can respond to that, as that's one of the graphics the Nord put together for us.
Sure, Jane, what was the question? Because I can't see it.
Sorry, the question was about your key graphic and whether that can be shared with other people for use to encourage people to collect data through registries.
Oh, absolutely. That's what it's for. Absolutely. We can make sure it gets to all the folks that need it. I believe it's on, if it's not on the website, it's going to be.
Thanks, Pam. That's wonderful. And I understand that my colleague from the FDA, Michelle Campbell, is on the line. Michelle, do you want to introduce yourself to the group? Welcome.
Well, thank you, Katie. My name is Michelle Campbell, and I lead stakeholder engagement for the Office of Neuroscience. So the group I work with and Katie's division collaborate on a daily basis as we work together to advance rare disease drug development and the trials we see.
Thanks, Michelle. So I'm not seeing a whole lot of new questions in the chat box. So if you have them, please put them in. I'm happy to address them with our panel. But I think given the breadth of experience here across multiple data platforms, it'd be helpful to hear how these different platforms have addressed some common challenges when it comes to data sharing. So maybe I could ask each of the panelists to say a little bit of something about how they've addressed issues like patient consent and control over data. And why don't we go ahead and start with Vanessa?
So I think patient control and consent over data for RareX is a big concern for most groups that are coming to us, especially in the governance piece of this. RareX is focused on basically patient governance of their own data. When we talk about patient data ownership, it's a very, very interesting question to educate around. So patient ownership and organization ownership of data gets into a lot of things. So if you're collecting data from day one on your home computer on a Excel spreadsheet, I don't know that RDCA-DAP is going to be able to connect with it. So there's a lot of things when it comes down to collecting data from day one that you need to go and educate around. So like in terms of IRBs and human subjects protection, in terms of sharing and consent, that's really where RareX is leveraging a lot of that education piece. Going into these organizations or these communities that are just starting up, that they want to collect data. What do they need in their governance? What do they need to make sure that they are stewarding data effectively, and what data ownership actually means versus like actually knowing where your data is going and knowing how to share it effectively. So I think that's a really big, there's a lot of definitions that we're focusing on especially when it comes through data collection and sharing.
Pam, do you want to chime in on that about how Nord's IAMRARE has been managing consent and patient privacy?
Yeah, sure. So to Vanessa's point, consent is extremely important, and data ownership and control and transparency is also very important principles for us to support. And the one way in which we've engaged in that is spending a lot of time in developing a pretty robust consent module, if you will. It's very configurable, and it needs to be, because the scenarios they vary from dealing with children and people under the age of 18 to dealing with folks who may be older but have to have a legally authorized representative or a caregiver manage their participation. So it's very important. I will definitely agree on those principles, and we've put a lot of our focus and resources to be able to support the various scenarios that actually exist out there in real world.
Thanks, Pam. And Alex, I saw you had something you wanted to chime in with.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. So I just wanted to add to this. So there are two types of consents in a sense. Ones that are dedicated to patient-reported outcomes, kind of patient portals, patient registries, repositories, and so on. But then consents that are being brought to the patients from academic researchers or industry even. We've been working for years to understand what would be the optimum of combination of both. So one thing is certainly in the consent you have to put as broad definition of how the data will be used as possible. So if you say that the data will be used for, say, Parkinson's research at Mass General, that means that you will not be able to compare it to other institutions or merge even, or you cannot, do it as a control study at Mass General for, say, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So one thing we did it and is that now we put in all our consents that my data will be used for any medical research purpose. So another important thing that IRBs are demanding right now is to make sure that global unique identifiers, if they're being used, so it has to be part of the consent. So patients have to be aware that some identifiers will be issued on them. So, and the last thing that I'm actually proud of, we've been working on this for almost a year and a half, but a couple of years ago we've been approved for this. So basically, most of the consents are being viewed as forward kind of moving permissions, right? And that means that any other information, including health records information or data from previous clinical trials, for instance, or clinical research studies, cannot be used in your current study. So we managed to put such paragraph into one of our consents, and now it's a standard at our organization. So basically it says that all data previously collected on me could be used for this study. So that means it allows you to add more and more information. So if you're running a prospective natural history study, you can add retrospective data from health records. So that's extremely important. Another important thing, just to make point, is that, again, you need to understand how to distribute this data. We don't want this, your data or our data, to be redistributed by someone else. So basically, when someone comes to c-path and downloads the data, we don't want them to resell our data or our patients' data. We don't want them to redistribute them without any commitments to whatever c-path is going to ask those downloaders to sign off. So that's extremely important for the originators of the data, because they are also guided by the IRBs and so on. So we want to know how the data are being used. And also the usage of data could be very important if we eventually decide to reward patients for clinical research participation. So if we want to incentivize patients, and we're working on platforms like that, in neurology space or rare disease space, actually international efforts. But it's important to track not only how the data were acquired or what did the data were acquired, but also when, who and when they were used this data, so we can reward patients for utilization of their data as well. Okay.
Thanks, Alex. And Tina, in our last minute or two, do you want to chime in on this?
I'm going to say really quickly, kind of jumping off on what Alex was saying, is that when you're consenting, don't just think of the one study you're consenting for, think of the future and think of the long term. And I think a lot of times people don't do that. So since it's 2:54, I think we're pretty close to done here. Thank you.
Thanks, Tina. And I want to thank all of our panelists. I really appreciate this. And you're sharing your experience. It sounds like beginning with the end in mind is a recurring theme here, and that to have sort of forward-looking consent is important. Although I think we heard from our earlier panel and again here that there is a lot of granularity that the RDCA-DAP provides in terms of control and transparency around the use of patient data. And so there can be control at the individual patient level about what data they want shared. And then there's, again, another layer of control at the level of the patient group about which stakeholders are going to get access to which data. And so there's sort of two layers of customization and autonomy available there on the RDCA-DAP platform, which I think is really important because this trust is fundamentally what this is about. And so I think those are key features. And as you're hearing from colleagues with lots of different platforms, that is cross-cutting, right? So that's an issue no matter where the collaborative scientific work is happening. So with that, I just want to thank all of our panelists very much. And we will close out our Q&A session. Jane, I'll turn it back to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you very much to the panel. That was great. And I know we'll all be talking again individually about how our various platforms can work together.